making some sense of the spirit world. Before we get into exploring and defining enlightenment in greater detail, let's explore the spirit world in a bit to get ourselves oriented and create the context within which enlightenment emerges. This is essential because the journey to enlightenment is a spiritual quest. There are spiritual forces that affect us beyond our physical bodies, and it is important to acknowledge that they exist and try to make sense of them without adhering to a specific religious teaching or, on the other hand, tossing the whole spiritual idea out the window. The definition of spirit. To begin, let's initially clarify the meanings of spirit, spiritual, religious, religion, and secular. There's so much confusion around these words that we should start off clarifying them to minimize further misunderstandings. According to Webster's dictionary, the spirit is an animating or vital principle held to give life to physical organisms, referring to the spirit of life. Spiritual is defined as of relating to, consisting of, or affecting the spirit. And according to one definition, the spirit is concerned with religious values. In turn, religious is defined in two ways. One, relating to or manifesting faithful devotion to an acknowledged ultimate reality or deity. Number two, of relating to or devoted to religious beliefs or observances. And finally, religion is defined as the service and worship of God or the supernatural. For our work, spiritual relates to the animating, vital principle or force that gives life to our physical bodies. According to this definition of the spirit is fully compatible with a secular viewpoint, where secular is defined by being not overtly or specifically religious. That is, a viewpoint which is not associated with a particular religious teaching or institution. Some definitions of secular imply referring to things non-spiritual, but that is not the definition of secular we are considering here. Combining cognitive and experiential guideposts. This is key to a successful experience, because if we are unsure of the context and contours within which we travel, that uncertainty can negatively affect the quality of our experiences and how far we can go. A key part of achieving enlightenment is eventually having aha moments, which are generated by a combination of cognitive and experiential ingredients. That is why we possess both capabilities. The varying interpretations of God and the universal spirit. As far as the issue of God is concerned, there is a wide spectrum of interpretations about what a universal spirit is all about. Most Western religions, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, perceive God not only as the unifying energy of the universe, but the creator as well. In Eastern religions, Hindus have a main god, Brahman, who's worshipped mainly through three gods: Brahma, a creator of the universe, Vishnu, a preserver of the universe, and Shiva, a destroyer of the universe. Buddhists believe in a major unifying spirit, but not a creator of the universe. Sorting out the spirit world from the physical world. We all thirst for simple explanations in trying to make sense of the spirit world. In many organized religions, the explanations of the spirit world vis-a-vis the physical world can be quite confusing. I believe the confusion stems from so many people through the millennia contributing to the writings of their holy books, commentaries, religious ceremonies, and traditions. This hit home for me a few years ago when the host of one of my Passover dinners announced there may not be reliable historical records to substantiate the story of Exodus in the Torah, when the Jews were supposedly freed from slavery in Egypt while helping build the pyramids. I grew up as the youngest child in my family and had the honor of reading the 4 questions in Hebrew during the Seder ceremony. Passover is my favorite annual spiritual event. It is a time to celebrate our desire for all people in the world to become free. I always look forward to the celebration, and I still do because of the feeling of love and compassion that surrounds this wonderful tradition. But to think that Exodus may only be a wonderful story was quite traumatic. Growing up, I was told it was absolutely true. There was always the big question and the endless debates of how the Red Sea opened up for the Jews who had just been set free by the Egyptian Pharaoh led by Moses. This miraculous escape occurred after the Egyptians had suffered terribly enduring the 10 plagues God brought down upon them to convince the Pharaoh to let the Jews go. The other big question was how the Red Sea swallowed up the Egyptian army as they were trying to recapture the fleeing Jews right after the Pharaoh changed his mind after freeing them. I was in awe watching Charleston Heston play Moses on the big screen. I was most proud of being a part of a people who experienced this amazing history of miracles. Over the past few years, I've been stewing over this uncertainty, and luckily my brother Gene, working with me on editing this book, referred me to an interview with Richard Elliott Friedman, professor of Jewish studies at the University of Georgia, who explained where the confusion occurred and made a very strong argument that the Exodus did actually take place. It was such a relief that I no longer had to live with this disappointment. I can now bring back those fond memories of Heston bringing down the commandments from Mount Sinai in peace. God, universal spirit, or source. From here on out, I will be using the word God to refer to a universal spirit or source. I know there are some people who feel uncomfortable with the use of the word God because of the many images that are associated with the word. But after finishing the writing of this book, I decided I just could not get away from the word. I'm too attached to it, and will be using it throughout the rest of the book. If you feel more comfortable with the words universal spirit or source, or some other word or image, feel free to think about that word or image you have when you see the word God. For full transparency, I believe in one God who is the Creator and is at our core and comprises our essence. However, the value of this book and the meditation program will still be valuable to you regardless of your belief system about God or individual spirit. In addition, for me, God is formless, based solely upon my own personal experiences. I have experienced God as a vast, infinite spirit possessing love, compassion, joy, peace, and infinite wisdom. These are the same basic elements that comprise our higher self. From our physical body to our higher self to God. I am of the belief that the relationship between the physical body, the higher self, and God is a smooth, uninterrupted spiritual continuum. The body is infused with spirit. The higher self provides spiritual energy and consciousness to our individual physical bodies. Our higher self has some form to it that correlates with our bodies. The higher self also provides a bridge to God. The key differentiator between God and our higher self is that God is infinite and formless and is focused on the whole universe. This simple structure allows us to feel free to connect with God at any time we want. Having this open-door policy is a key foundation to living a healthy and happy life. Here is the first brief meditation with your eyes open, though you can do it with your eyes closed if you prefer. For our meditation, let's do a simple breathing exercise. Meditation. I invite you now to stop for a moment to take 3 deep, gentle breaths while observing the air going through your nose as you inhale and going out of your nose as you exhale. So let's begin. Great. Thank you. The formless debate. Again, it is my belief that the higher self possesses a spiritual form, while our bodies are filled with spirit taking on a physical form. It makes sense that our physical bodies are the way they are because of God's efforts and the constraints of the laws of the universe, evolution, gravity, atomic structures, time-space, and so on. Some spiritual teachers believe the higher self does not have any form because spirit in general is not physical. For further clarification, the words soul and spirit are quite often used interchangeably. However, when I use the word spirit, I do so as a general term for the spiritual realm that includes any mind-related entities, including the ego mind, the higher self, and God. I only use the word soul when I'm referring to the higher self, because I believe the soul and the higher self are identical. The higher self, soul, operating separately from the body. In looking back on my own personal experiences, I've had 2 events and 1 ongoing life experience that frames my conclusions on the higher self having form and living longer than our bodies. The first was years ago when I had an out-of-body experience, when I found myself floating near the ceiling of an examination room in my dentist's office, while being given nitrous oxide gas prior to having my cavities filled to avoid feeling pain. While floating near the ceiling, I was able to look down at my body in the dental chair. I was quite aware and fully conscious, plus I sensed I had a form. Not necessarily with arms and legs, but I felt whole. The other profound moment was when I was at the funeral for a close friend's granddaughter. My close friend, George Simon, had died a few years prior to his granddaughter's tragic death as a result of an automobile accident. While I was kneeling down to observe her in an open coffin prior to the formal funeral ceremony, I looked up, and there was George's spirit floating above her body in full form, grabbing onto his granddaughter's arm, seemingly pulling her up to him. It was a very vivid experience. I did not have much time to stay to continue to observe this happening because there was a long line behind me. Later that day, at a family luncheon, I mentioned what I experienced to a number of the family members, and George's oldest daughter said that she had seen George as well. Between these 2 experiences, I became a firm believer in the presence of a soul that is different from God, because I experienced my soul and George's soul having form, albeit in a spiritual form. My significant, lifelong experience is that as I get older, my observing consciousness does not seem to age, but does grow wiser. It appears to be operating from a different time frame relative to the body. Because of this differential, I believe in reincarnation, that our souls use the body we have now, and when this body becomes used up, our souls leave the body and eventually take on a new one. It makes sense to me that the lifetime of our souls is much greater than the lifetime of each of the bodies we use. We need a number of bodies to live a full soul's life. How many bodies a soul utilizes is a question I can't answer, and how enlightenment affects this process, I also do not know. In Buddhism and in Hinduism, enlightenment plays a big role in the process of reincarnation, and each religion has different beliefs around this dynamic. Are we all one? Now, one of the big challenges we face is trying to understand in what way we are connected to each other. When our consciousness is stuck in our ego minds, we experience a sharp separateness between ourselves and everyone else, including our immediate family members. Our ego minds primarily focus on each of us having individual bodies because the ego mind cannot experience spiritual reality and interconnectedness. From a spiritual perspective, if you believe we all essentially emerge from the one God, then at the deepest level of reality, we are all connected. And if you take it a step further from a holistic perspective, we are all one. A theory of a grand design. The previous discussion assumes that God is formless, is the creator of life as well as the entire physical universe. It then seems logical to assume God values physical experiences because God created us in a physical form and gave us the opportunity to experience life, our higher self, and God from the vantage point of this physical world. To differentiate the human race from all other creatures on Earth, it seems the most important and unique function humans possess is a sophisticated ability to self-reflect, to be aware that we are aware. This self-reflection capability is maybe what God needs from us, to be continually self-aware. In other words, God needs a human mirror to reflect upon itself, and for us to reflect upon our true selves by the way we live our lives. This requires the attainment of enlightenment. Maybe that is the grand design, if there is one. To appreciate all of this, and have hope that there might be a grand design, one has to look at the tremendous amount of creativity and billions of years of work needed to manifest us, which is in and of itself a miracle. Concerning work, I refer to the amazing processes of creating life out of inanimate objects, creating a vast library of information in each cell's genome, creating mitosis so cells can divide, creating multicellular creatures, and the myriad of species to finally get to us. Meditation. I invite you now to stop for a moment and take 3 gentle, deep breaths while concentrating on the part of your consciousness that is being aware of your breath. Let's start now. Now take 3 more gentle breaths and then relax. Great. Thank you. The 2 major illusions to dispel. Our spiritual journey is about discovering and connecting with our true reality, and this requires us to dispel 2 major illusions to reach a state of enlightenment. One is dealing with the ego mind having fooled us into thinking it is who we really are, and the second related illusion is thinking we are solely our bodies, thoughts, sensations, and feelings that are separate from the world around us. Experiencing both of these illusions are like being lost in a spiritual desert searching for drinking water. When we look around, all we see is sand as far as the eye can see. The search ahead requires a combination of cognitive and experiential skills. The cognitive skills serve like a GPS function to find out where we need to drill. Then once we are properly situated, we can then experientially drill down within ourselves using a meditative practice to connect with our vast spiritual reservoir to quench our thirst. Being in this world, but not of it. We are living in this physical world, but it is key to develop an awareness of observing our day-to-day lives from a spiritual perspective. A good guideline in life is to be in this physical world, but not of it, as Jesus made this point very clear. A good way to keep an arm's length distance in dealing with the physical world is to disidentify from the body, emphasizing that the body is not all who we are. From the ego mind's perspective, it believes we are only physical bodies and our happiness resides having physical things and possessions. The more I have, the happier I'll be. That is thought to be true about other things like sex, recreational drugs, and power over people. However, there are many stories of people who wake up one day and realize that after spending a lot of their lives amassing wealth and power, that is not the way to happiness. That happened to me as well. In Chapter 5, I propose a definition of true happiness, which is based upon breaking free from the illusion of the ego mind, while bringing to life our higher self independent from physical possessions. Disidentify from the body, but still honor it. Let's examine this question. What is the function of our bodies anyway? It would make sense that our bodies serve as tools for our formless God, because God created us. Otherwise, why would there be a need for our physical bodies anyway? The full spectrum from God to the higher self to the physical body is along a spiritual continuum, moving from pure formlessness to more and more of form configuration. The role our higher self plays is as a bridge between the formless God and the physical body. However, I want to make it very clear that the physical body is really form heavily infused with spirit. What I mean is the body uses active spiritual energy to function in this world. This concept became clear to me when I observed a number of scientists' graphical video conceptions of what is going on inside each and every one of our cells. The complexity is totally overwhelming, and what became clear to me is that the activity in our bodies is not all about chemistry, but primarily spiritual forces at work, mainly in the form of consciousness, which is our life force in action. Consciousness is a spiritual, self-organizing entity not only for our minds, but for our bodies as well. Therefore, our bodies are made of spiritual and physical elements. Together, they are one. Each and every person created by God is all part of the one. Question: are we form or formless? God is a spiritual entity that created the physical world, which we define as the world of form. The spirit world, which is different from the physical world, we define as the world of formlessness. If you accept this premise, then at our ultimate core, we are one with God. We are formless. Could this be true? Yes. Why is this important? Well, we are dealing with a few challenges in trying to fully understand what we are made of. If we are at our core sourced from a formless God, and our higher self has a spiritual form, and our bodies are physical form, then are we creatures of form or formlessness? I believe we are both. We are part of a continuum from formlessness to form. To further make this lack of distinction between formlessness and form clearer, the latest in scientific discourses ponder the essential nature of the atom, which is the building block of form. When you explore deep into the atom, you discover subatomic particles, which are much smaller than protons and neutrons, such as quarks and neutrinos. Quantum physicists now question if there is actually form at the atom's core, or is there only formlessness and probabilities? Top theoretical scientists are actually trying to grapple with these uncertainties, and one thing is clear: physical form is not what we generally think it to be. Einstein's theory of general relativity made it very clear that physical reality is quite pliable, and so much a function of our perceptions and circumstances. For example, if you're traveling at the speed of light, time stands still. Time absolutely stops, and as you slow down, time speeds up. Quantum mechanics takes the uncertainty of physical reality to even more bizarre levels. To assume we understand the world of form as being the solid, very well understood state is an illusion. Emptiness or love? Many of the main Eastern religions use the words emptiness, unmanifested, and formless to describe the spiritual realm. I'm not crazy about their usage because they're using words that are hard to wrap our minds around. In our journey, we're going to take an opposite approach. Instead of looking at the spiritual realm as incomprehensible, we're going to approach it directly from the feelings we get when we experience spirit. I agree the cognitive mind has its limits in comprehending spirit, and that is why the experiences we have in meditation are essential. But if consciousness is who we are, then the feelings we have when we experience spirit should be how we define spirit. That is, love, compassion, joy, inner peace, and intuitive wisdom all in one package. Learning how to experience spirit through heightening our ability to experience each of the key components of spirit, higher self, and God through the JTE is the ticket to enlightenment. Scientists' sense of the relationships between spirit and form. We tend to think that scientists are totally into the physical world and have no patience or interest in the spiritual realm. However, Einstein, the greatest scientist in history, looked at reality from a spiritual perspective, which was reflected in the following two quotes. "I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details." And then he wrote, "A scientist's religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority." Einstein was expressing the relationship he and other scientists have with trying to understand the nature of physical reality in scientific and mathematical terms. Even from the scientific perspective, he perceived a universal spirit or godlike intelligent entity creating it all. Max Planck, considered the father of quantum mechanics, even though a team of scientists contributed to its full formulation, believed that the mind is more basic than matter. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. The two greatest scientific breakthroughs that best describe the nature of reality are Einstein's general theory of relativity and Planck's quantum mechanics. The fathers of both of these theories believed in a spirit or consciousness as the underlying basis of physical reality. Then why did the scientific world end up being so spiritually vacuous? That is a great question. During the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment period, scientists were creating a body of knowledge that was diametrically opposed to the then current societal beliefs that were dominated by religious institutions. As science was discovering new scientific breakthroughs that were disproving the spiritual beliefs, for many segments of the society, these new visions of reality were being quickly adopted. The greatest example of this is Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwin's theory became promoted by the lay press. Behind the scenes, Darwin's theories were being absolutely refuted by the greatest paleontologist of the time, Louis Agassiz, who was a professor at Harvard. Darwin sent one of his final draft copies of his book On the Origin of Species to Agassiz for feedback. Agassiz refuted Darwin's theory for a number of reasons. A scientific mistake, untrue in its facts, unscientific in its method, and mischievous in its tendencies. One major reason for Agassiz's dismay was Darwin did not fully address the most troubling anomaly, the Cambrian explosion. The Cambrian explosion, a fossil discovery representing a period starting 500 million years ago that lasted about 20 million years. This discovery showcased so many new and diverse species of life in such a short period of time that Darwin's theory could not even begin to explain it. Even Darwin admitted that this discovery tested the validity of his theories, and he hoped that future discoveries would help validate his theories. During the past 150 years, there have been no new supportive fossil discoveries to help substantiate Darwin's theories. Over the past century and one half, Darwin's theories have been under constant attacks and criticisms. 40 years ago, Stephen Jay Gould, another famous Harvard paleontologist, declared that neo-Darwinism, quote, is effectively dead, despite its persistence as textbook orthodoxy, end quote. Gould had his own theory of evolution that was described as punctuated equilibrium, that species undergo long periods of stasis, followed by rapid changes over relatively short periods, instead of continuously accumulating slow changes over millions of years, as Darwin had theorized. More recently, as greater understanding of the complexities of how genes function, Darwin's theories are now only seriously being considered to explain minor physical changes, but definitely not to explain the emergence of new species. The most fascinating discussion is in the field of intelligent design and how it might play a role in evolution. The two books that I just completed, Darwin's Doubts, The Explosive Origin of Animal Life and the Case for Intelligent Design, and The Signature in the Cell, DNA Evidence for Intelligent Design, by Stephen Meyer. I highly recommend reading them both. Stephen Meyer received his doctorate at Cambridge University, and his dissertation was on the origin of life biology. What is so fascinating is that we have here a credible research scientist whose life work has been on how the spirit plays an active role not only in the origin of life, but also in the evolution of life. The big takeaway for me is that when you analyze the complexities of how life begins and how new species are created, random mutation and natural selection is only a small part of the factors involved. My belief that our physical bodies are infused with the active involvement of spirit and consciousness for not only our moment-to-moment functioning, but in our creation and the direction we are headed, was further validated by reading Meyer's books. Where are we headed? I discern an overall pattern to the spiritual game plan that runs parallel to the role we as individuals play in providing a self-reflective function by serving God. We discuss periodically the role that each of our own personal struggles play in motivating us to reach out beyond the ego mind's non-spiritual perspective to search for greater meaning, and that this search many times ends up with us discovering spirit. Now, as our planet and our species currently face such extreme existential dangers, our collective struggles are creating a dangerous pressure cooker environment. This is forcing us to try to figure out what ways we can elevate our consciousness to be able to create a new, more healing environment that is very much different than the one we have created now. The fact is that we may not be able to survive if we continue on the path that we're on. That in our brains and hearts we possess a neural network that is currently dormant, which is the receiver for our higher self and God. God has, through evolution, provided us with these receivers to experience our higher self as well as God. If enough of the human species takes this spiritual journey, creating heaven on earth is a real possibility and may be where we are all headed if things go our way. Is this the Holy Grail? The first major story in the Bible depicts human beings in a state of enlightenment in the Garden of Eden. Then we lose it by falling into a realm of illusion dominated by our ego mind based on fear. It now appears to me that God is moving us towards a world filled with humans who are rediscovering the truth. That is, working towards being directly connected with the Spirit all day long. This appears to be the biggest story of all time. Meditation. I invite you now to be in the here and now by taking 3 deep, gentle breaths through your nose while feeling the cool air coming in and the warm air coming out.